The morning started just like any other, until it didn't. I shuffled out of bed, wrapped myself in my robe, grabbed my coffee, and stepped onto my porch, ready to face another day. But something was off. My driveway looked empty. My truck was gone. At first, I thought I had lost my mind. Maybe I had parked it down the street? Maybe I was still half asleep, and my eyes were playing tricks on me. I did a slow 360, scanning my property, hoping my F-150 would suddenly materialize. But no, my truck, the one I had parked right there less than 10 hours ago, had vanished into thin air. Panic set in. Had it been stolen? The neighborhood was quiet, mostly retirees and families. Not exactly a hotbed for grand theft auto. I sprinted inside, nearly knocking over my dog, and grabbed my phone to call the police. Just as I started dialing, a voice cut through the early morning air. "Oh, don't bother." It was Toad. I turned slowly, dread creeping up my spine, and there she was, Karen. The HOA overlord, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, the woman who once fined a guy for leaving his Christmas lights up until January 2nd. She stood on her perfectly manicured lawn, a smug smirk curling her lips, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me?" I blinked, genuinely unable to process what I had just heard. "Your truck violated HOA aesthetics. No trucks in driveways." She tapped her clipboard as if it contained the immutable laws of the universe, not just some overreaching HOA nonsense. Page 342, subsection 12b. My brain short-circuited. My truck. My driveway. My private property. And this woman just had it towed. You took my truck?" My voice cracked with pure, unfiltered rage. She nodded, completely unfazed. "We gave you a warning last month." I stared at her. "A warning? Where?" She pulled a sheet of paper from her clipboard and waved it like a villain brandishing a court order. It was some passive-aggressive memo, probably left in my mailbox along with the weekly HOA threats about mailbox colors and grass height. "Unbelievable," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "Where did you even have it towed?" "Oh, you can call this number," she said sweetly, handing me a card. "It's a private lot. It's only about 5 miles away." "Oh, and they charge $250 per day for storage. Have a great morning." She turned on her heel and strutted inside like she had just won an Oscar for Best HOA Villain in a drama series. I stood there, fuming, seething, my coffee growing cold in my hand. This wasn't just about the truck. This was war. I didn't even bother changing out of my pajamas. I jumped into my wife's car and sped to the impound lot, still barefoot, my robe flapping like some rage-filled suburban superhero. I nearly kicked down the office door. The guy behind the counter barely looked up. "Let me guess. HOA got you. You have no idea." $250 later, and a ton of paperwork signed in blood, I finally got my truck back. As I drove it home, my fury only grew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was personal. And if Karen wanted a war over my driveway, then fine. She had no idea who she was messing with. The rage hadn't faded by the time I pulled into my driveway. In fact, it had only gotten worse. The audacity. The sheer nerve. Karen thought she could dictate what I parked on my own property? Oh, she had messed with the wrong person. I sat in my truck, gripping the wheel, running through every possible way to get back at her. A lawsuit? Too slow. An angry Facebook rant? Too weak. Maybe I could park the truck in the street and technically follow her stupid rules? No, that wasn't enough. No, if she had a problem with my truck, I was going to make her regret ever messing with me. That's when it hit me. A tractor. It was perfect. I called up my cousin, who lived about an hour away. He owned a big, ugly farm-duty tractor, a beast of a machine that looked like it belonged plowing fields, not sitting in a tidy suburban driveway. "Hey, you still got that old John Deere?" I asked. "Yeah, why?" "I need to borrow it." There was a long pause. Then he laughed. "What the hell are you up to?" "Petty revenge. I'll bring it over tomorrow." The next morning, right before sunrise, my cousin rumbled into the neighborhood at a glorious, ear-shattering volume. This thing was massive, bright orange, rusted in all the wrong places, wheels the size of small cars. The kind of machine that looked like it could mow down a house if it wanted to. I grinned as I climbed aboard and slowly, dramatically, parked it dead center in my driveway. Neighbors peeked out their windows. A few of them gasped. A kid on a bike literally stopped pedaling and just stared. It was a monument to pettiness, a symbol of defiance, a middle finger in tractor form. And then, right on cue, like a storm gathering over a battlefield, Karen appeared. She stormed out of her house, her bathrobe flapping behind her, her iconic clipboard of doom clenched in her claws. The sheer horror on her face was delicious. "What is that?" she shrieked. I casually leaned against the massive tire, sipping my coffee like this was just another Tuesday morning. "Oh, this?" I gestured at the multi-ton beast of agricultural machinery taking up my driveway. "It's my new ride." She blinked. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "That is not allowed," she finally sputtered. "Oh, but see, Karen," I said, reaching into my back pocket. "I did some reading last night. I pulled out a printed copy of the HOA rulebook, the very same one she loved to throw in people's faces. Turns out, your rules only say trucks can't be parked in the driveway. Nowhere does it say anything about tractors." I watched the realization dawn on her face. She had nothing. For the first time ever, Karen was speechless. Neighbors started gathering, watching the showdown. One guy even pulled out his phone, filming the whole thing. "You can't. You're making a mockery of the rules," she finally screeched. "Oh, I know." I grinned. "Ain't it great?" She started shaking with rage, fists clenching, face turning the same shade as the tractor. "I will have this removed immediately," she spat. "Just you wait." And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed back inside, probably to summon whatever HOA demons she prayed to. I just smiled, leaned against my tractor, and waited. Because this was only the beginning. I had about 2 hours of pure, unfiltered victory before Karen made her next move. I was sitting on my porch, admiring the absolute monstrosity of a tractor sitting in my driveway, when I saw her again. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 cop cars pulled up in front of my house. I actually laughed out loud. She called the police. Over a tractor. I stayed put as 2 officers stepped out. One looked bored out of his mind. The other was trying very hard not to smile. Karen, on the other hand, was vibrating with fury, waving her hands like she was describing the scene of a horrific crime. "There it is. That thing is ruining property values and violating our HOA rules. I demand you make him remove it." The officers exchanged glances. The board one side and walked up to me. "Sir, your neighbor is claiming this vehicle is illegally parked?" I couldn't stop grinning. "Illegally? No. Pedally? Absolutely." The other cop finally cracked a smile. "So, you're saying this is legal?" "Oh, I did my homework. The HOA has rules about trucks and driveways. But nothing, not a single word about tractors." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. He's twisting the rules. It's an eyesore. It's a violation of community standards." The first cop scratched his head. "Ma'am, HOA rules are a civil matter. We don't enforce those." Then cite him for having a non-street legal vehicle in a residential area. Karen shrieked, reaching for any legal ground she could stand on. The second cop walked up to the tractor and ran a hand across the dusty frame. "This thing doesn't even have plates," he muttered, clearly amused. Then he turned back to me. "Where'd you even get this?" "Borrowed it from my cousin." "And why?" I flashed my biggest, most innocent grin. "Because my truck got towed, and I needed a replacement." The cop actually laughed. "That's one way to handle it." Karen stomped her foot, full tantrum mode activated. "This isn't funny. You have to do something." The first officer turned back to me. "Sir, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think we have any actual laws that say you can't park a tractor in your driveway." Karen gasped. "What? But it's a nuisance. It's ruining the look of our neighborhood." "That sounds like a personal problem, ma'am." The second cop smirked. Karen screeched in frustration. "So you're telling me there's nothing you can do?" "Nothing legal," the officer said, barely holding back laughter. "This is an HOA issue, not a police issue. Please stop calling 911 over neighborhood disputes." Karen looked like she was about to explode. Her hands clenched into fists, her eyes twitching, her jaw working as she tried to find some kind of comeback. But she had nothing. The first officer turned back to me, shaking his head. "Have a nice day, sir." And then, just to absolutely destroy Karen's soul, the second cop actually high-fived me before walking back to his car. I waved at Karen as the police drove off, enjoying every second of her absolute humiliation. She stood there for a moment, seething, plotting. I knew this wasn't over. But at that moment, I was winning. Karen disappeared for 2 whole days after the police showdown, which honestly made me nervous. She wasn't the type to just give up. No, she was probably huddled in her lair of pettiness, flipping through HOA bylaws like an ancient sorcerer searching for a loophole to curse her enemies. And sure enough, on the third morning, I got served. A formal HOA legal notice was taped to my door, printed in big, angry, lawsuit-colored font. Karen had gone full legal warfare. I skimmed through the paperwork while sipping my coffee, muttering under my breath. Violation, eyesore, public nuisance. Fines accruing daily, legal action if noncompliance within 72 hours. Then I saw the last paragraph. It wasn't just about the tractor. Karen had somehow dug up a technicality that claimed my entire driveway extension was non-compliant with HOA regulations. She wasn't just trying to remove the tractor. She was trying to get my driveway torn out. Oh, so that's how you want to play it. I muttered. Time to lawyer up. I walked over to my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, a retired lawyer who'd lived in the neighborhood long before Karen took over. The moment he read the letter, he snorted. She's really trying this? She's desperate. Well, he said, adjusting his glasses, let's make her regret it. He spent the next 3 hours going through the HOA rulebook, marking pages, highlighting loopholes, cross-referencing bylaws like he was preparing for the Supreme Court. And then, right before sunset, he handed me a golden ticket of revenge. Take this to the emergency HOA meeting, he said with a satisfied smirk. This isn't just going to backfire. It's going to take her down. That night, I walked into the HOA meeting like a man marching into battle. Karen was already there, looking smug. I assume you've read the notice, she said, oozing superiority. I expect compliance by Friday. I smiled. Oh, I've read it. But see, Karen, I also found this. I pulled out the HOA bylaws she didn't want anyone to read. See, Karen had been running the HOA like a dictatorship for years. But what she never told anyone. Half the rules she enforced weren't actually valid. Turns out, when the original HOA was formed, there was a rule about rule changes. Any major policy affecting homeowners' property rights had to be voted on by the entire community. And guess what? Karen never got a vote. Every stupid restriction, the truck rule, the mailbox height, the fine system, all of it was invalid. The room erupted into chaos. Neighbors started murmuring, whispering, yelling. Wait, so she made up half these rules. She's been fining us illegally? She towed my car last year over a rule that doesn't even count. Karen went pale. It's not. I cut her off. Karen, per the HOA charter, these rules needed a neighborhood vote. And since that never happened, I moved to repeal every single one of them. Mr. Thompson, the retired lawyer, nodded. He's right. We'll need an official vote, but legally speaking, these rules shouldn't even exist. Karen froze, realizing she had lost everything. And then the real twist hit. Someone in the back of the room shouted, "Then let's vote to remove Karen as HOA president." And just like that, the entire neighborhood turned against her. Karen fought it. She screamed, pleaded, threatened legal action, but it was over. The neighbors, sick of her power trip and petty nonsense, voted her out on the spot. The moment it became official, someone actually cheered. Karen sat there, shell-shocked, as her empire of pettiness crumbled around her. I leaned in, just enough for her to hear me. Oh, and Karen? The tractor's staying. Just because. And for the first time ever, she had nothing left to say. The moment Karen's removal was official, the entire room felt lighter. It was like someone had finally lifted a years-long curse off the neighborhood. People who had once been afraid to even look her in the eye were suddenly celebrating, talking, and laughing. It was like we had overthrown a dictator, except instead of burning effigies, we were already planning a neighborhood cookout. Karen, meanwhile, sat there frozen, staring at the table as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. She had lost. And worse, she had lost to me. I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I made a big show of pulling my truck back into my driveway, parking it right where the tractor had been. Not because I needed to. No, I did it out of pure, unfiltered spite. And for the cherry on top, the tractor stayed too. See, now that Karen was out, the new HOA board, led by a reasonable neighbor named Susan, decided that since half the old rules were technically illegal, we needed a full HOA reset. Until they could draft new, sane rules, there were no parking restrictions at all. Which meant I could park whatever the hell I wanted in my driveway. Cue me, sipping my coffee the next morning, admiring my driveway's new double feature. My beloved truck and my beautiful, oversized tractor. It was petty perfection. Karen, meanwhile, was spiraling. She spent the next week desperately trying to get back in control. She tried everything, whisper campaigns, passive-aggressive emails, even a last-ditch petition to reinstate the old rules. But nobody was listening anymore. Her final humiliation came when she realized the entire neighborhood had turned against her. At one point, she tried storming up to my house, clipboard in hand, ready to spew whatever nonsense she had left. But before she could even knock, my next-door neighbor beat her to it. A sweet old man named Mr. Jenkins, who had been in the neighborhood for 30 years, opened his door and said, loud enough for the whole block to hear, "Karen, if you don't leave that man alone, we're all going to park tractors in our driveways just to spite you." Karen flinched like she'd been slapped. She didn't say a word. She just turned and walked away. And that was the moment we all knew. Karen was finished. A week later, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. She lasted exactly 10 more days before she packed up and moved out of the neighborhood for good. The night she left, the entire street erupted into a full-blown celebration. People brought out lawn chairs, beer, grilled burgers, and cranked up the music. Someone even set off fireworks. I sat on my porch, basking in my glorious victory, watching her car pull away for the last time. And just for good measure, I had placed one final parting gift on her front porch that morning. A miniature tractor figurine. Because some people deserve to be reminded of their mistakes forever. As I sat in my driveway, leaning against my truck with a cold beer in hand, I took a long, satisfying breath. It was over. The reign of HOA Karen had come to a spectacular, humiliating end, and peace had been restored to the neighborhood. The best part? The tractor was still sitting there. Not because I needed it anymore, but because at this point, it was a trophy. A monument to pettiness and a reminder that sometimes the only way to deal with ridiculous HOA nonsense is to out-petty the pettiest. Neighbors passed by, grinning, giving me nods of approval. Legendary move, man. That tractor belongs in a museum. I'm naming my next dog after you. It was one of the greatest victories of my life. But what did I learn from all of this? HOAs can be nightmares, but they're not unbeatable. Always read the rules, because sometimes the people enforcing them don't even understand them. A little creativity and a whole lot of pettiness can go a long way when fighting back against HOA tyranny. Never underestimate the power of community. Once people saw that Karen's rules were a fraud, the whole neighborhood united against her. And most importantly, if someone messes with your truck, park a tractor out of spite. I leaned back in my chair, grinning at the camera. So, what's the pettiest thing you've ever done to an HOA? Drop your wildest stories in the comments, because trust me, I know I'm not the only one who's had to deal with an HOA Karen. I raised my beer in a mock toast to all the HOA warriors out there. Stay petty, my friends.